Before we get started into the transitional part of the video where I show you how to surface that, even though my videos tend to be for more advanced users, I did actually want to take a little step back and explain a little bit about NURBS, because a lot of people don't actually know what they are. You know, all the shading that you're looking at, that's just a tessellation. NURBS are basically four-sided spline membranes, and what that basically means is that this whatever point you put in this surface, you could extrapolate where that point would be in space based on these control points and the outer edges. And if you go into object edit and path precision, and if you sort of move it, you compress it, you see these are all I'm doing is having visual representations of the curves inside of this surface. And these surfaces are also just it's the computer telling it, okay, give me a curve every certain amount of space in this surface. But it's an infinite plane. You know, you could find wherever what a point in space, no matter how precise you want to be. And and a lot of times you'll see in my video that I use the insert tool. And a lot of people, I don't know if they know about this tool, but it's in object edit, insert here, and then in options you use curve on surface. And the reason why I do that is because instead of projecting a line, right, like something like that. Whoops. Instead of projecting a line, if I can make the transition based on these curves, I'd rather do that. So I'll use my insert tool and just place it wherever, or across the surface. And then so now this curve on surface is a super clean 3-degree curve versus this one, which has a bunch of spans everywhere. And there's nothing wrong with any of that, because what's more important is obviously the design intent. But I do try to, if it is possible, I'll use these as a way to cut the surface. Also, even to extract a curve from the surface, you could in the duplicate curve tool, which in my hotkeys is duplicate N, and then shift N does you can choose an edge and see, and now I extracted that curve from there here. So yeah, and you'll see a lot in this video how I use that to simplify the functions or the tools that I'm trying to Alias to do. That's basically what I'm doing. I'm trying to make it as easy as possible for the algorithms and the tools to do what I want them to do. So you'll see me isolate things and trim them to like sort of make it basically what I just said. Anyways, we'll start at in the beginning. We'll go at double speed, and I'll explain the process, and then once it gets repetitive, I'll go up to 4x, and then that way I think there's a lot to learn, just watching, even though it's basically the same steps. And then you also notice that I'll use different moves for very similar actions, and that's just a reflection on how fluid I am. Like I just whatever comes in first in my head, I'll just try it out. So anyways, I hope you guys enjoy it, and yeah, here we go. Okay, so I always try to put a higher priority on the important design lines, like this shoulders transition. I know it's gonna control a lot, so that's sort of what I'm figuring out right now. And then to make those cuts, I use the insert tool, and now I'm using my blend curves to make the surface in the middle. And this to me is still very loose, especially in the beginning, because there's just so much work to do that you just kind of wanna sort of push through and get the majority out of the way, as opposed to getting every single transition perfect right now. And then see in that surface in the rear fender, I tried to put insert, but it didn't really work with that shape. So now I'm doing project, which I know is gonna cost me a bit more in terms of the complexity of it. But you know, it's there's the design of that transition is more important than it being cleaner. Um, Mathematically speaking. But you know, we always try to make it as clean as possible. And I just quickly did a freeform blend. I'll try that out quickly, you know, to see if it works, and if it doesn't, then I'll go more into a custom made thing. And if you notice here, the blend point, I didn't connect it initially, and now when I edit, I will, because if you connect it all the way to the corner, it sort of locks itself in there. And you could change that in the tools, but in my workflow, I just first leave it close to the edge, and then I edit it into it, and that gives me a nice control over it. It doesn't get like stuck on that corner. This actual corner was a bit difficult. I will confess that this was probably like my third attempt, and it just because, you know, sometimes I don't know why you just you can't find the curvature, and you know, a lot of times you just gotta go home or stop working on the project, and then you come back and it becomes really easy. The main problem is that break in those surfaces, and Alias's automatic way of finding curvature. Um, it's not really working out. But I do know that those two surfaces are curvature with themselves. So I know that if I do enough custom modeling, I can get it there. It's just I'm just trying to find the best solution right now. And so I'm leaving that blend curve in the middle. I'm leaving it alive so I could you know, change the CV structure. So after once I get to once I like the general shape of my CVs, I trim convert. No, I didn't trim convert them. I basically separated the spans, and then I project align them. And here now I'm just trying to figure out how I can get tangency between, well, curvature between everybody, and I'm reading those little numbers. And if and it's quite the balance, because you would find curvature in one side, but then you would lose it on the other. So I had to do a bunch of CV massaging. Um, but I'm so used to doing this in general that it's really not that much time. And also, you got to remember that where is this gonna go? Because if it's gonna get milled out or something like that, you know, I'm only finding curvature. That was more of a mathematical equation. You know, I was moving the CV less than a tenth of a millimeter. You know, most of the time that is not gonna really matter when you mill it out. I've milled out. I've worked as an exterior designer in a bunch of studios, and a bunch of my models have been milled out, and and that teaches you a lot about how, in, you know, curvature and tangency. Once you actually see it in real life, it's really difficult to actually tell the difference, even from because sometimes I'll put a surface break that I really like, and then when it gets milled out, you can't even see it, you know. So remember that, you know, don't get too caught up on making sure that everything is curvature and green, you know, just especially at this point in the process, just, you know, focus on the transition and the design of the transitions. Here I'm doing the radius on the bottom corner of the window. And the reason why there's two is that surface, once it goes towards the side mirror, it bends in to kind of transition into the hood, and that's why I have basically two surfaces meeting up with one surface. And see there, I use that insert tool again. And here I even skinned it between the two blend curves, as opposed to, I don't know, maybe using a square or um or maybe a freeform blend. And then I just detach it there off the middle. And then with my detach tool, I do the same thing. I detach it based off you know, the isoparms of the surface, so it gives me a nice clean detachment. You'll see that a lot in my videos. You know, if I have multiple surfaces or design elements that are coming to a surface, I'll I'll untrim them if they're the same, and then I'll do the transition, and then I'll add the trims later, because I don't want to, if you can make it into one surface, just keep it at one surface, you know, on when you have two design elements next to each other or something, you know. A lot of times it's the same surface, it's just a projection and a curve and a trimming. Here I'm just trying to figure out the radius of that design line. Another thing that you guys should know is that, you know, my design is very much based on what's easier for me to surface, because also that's also kind of like what I like. I like seeing these types of transitions. Um, but it also shows why this is so easy. You know, we're looking at I think 4 hours of work, or 5 hours of work, and we do most of the transitions, or most of the main transitions. And um, and that also has to do a lot with the fact that I've done these solutions a lot. You know, like this is probably my, I don't know, fourth rebuild. You know, just because, you know, if I could rebuild it in an afternoon, so I do changes all the time. Like right now, I didn't like how round it was initially, so I just quickly untrimmed it again, and I'm gonna trim it again, delete the original one, freeform blend across it, untrim the previous trim, project trim, and there. Easy. Okay, so now I'm just railing it across that surface, using that transition I just made, and then seeing how I can get a clean surface there, because I know I'm gonna trim it anyways, and then I also know way later it's gonna get eliminated too. So I don't think I had to, you know, I felt like that this is a very quick, easy solution for that, you know, especially with that type of transition. And then here I project a line, I project the edge and then trim it. As I keep going, I always try to keep the step clean, you know, even if I know in the end it might not happen. Oh, look, this is pretty cool. I untrim it, and then I extend that trim uh, curve on surface, and then then I only have that. Then I add the fillet, and see, now I could do edge align. See, when you have your hotkeys mapped up, especially the project, trim, and untrim, it's super easy to switch between this sort of thing. And right there, I couldn't get oh yeah, there you go. Yeah, now I'm untrimming it and getting and they kind of finished that whole little piece. See, now we're just slowly building it in. Sometimes I'll just, you know, when I look at the whole model, I start getting a bit like anxiety, but then I'll just kind of like just look at one transition and focus on solving that, and not think about anything else. Here I'm just adding because I already know in this type of treatment, you know, Alias isn't exactly the fillet tool. It isn't that good, so you really have to isn't that good for this type of situation. So you have to make a custom surface transition. So there I'm just connecting it with some curves, trimming them, and then deleting the trim curves, and then putting a square there. And then here you'll see that I couldn't get curvature, but what I did, because that's being connected to that trim on surface. So right now you'll see that I untrim it, and then delete it, and then project a line. See? And now I got curvature. A lot of times that's your best bet to get curvature. Like if you're lining something that was projected before or whatever, the projected line tool, it uses the own surface to develop that curve on surface. So it's that's how I clean up a lot of my surfaces. Here I'm doing the same thing, inserting the isopron and putting a little curve, blend curve between them. And since all these little lines, like I said in my other video, they're all based off each other, it usually means that all these transitions, I don't really have to think about them too much, because since the structure is correct, or quote unquote correct, I know that the transition will look cool and there won't be no twist, and yeah, that's why it's very valuable to build rails off each other, and then that way you have really nice clean lines. Here we move on to the face of Electra, and I'll start by putting a smooth surface across the middle. And right now I just inserted it and inserted a curve and trimmed it, and then I extended those surfaces back. When it comes to transitional surfaces, feel free to extend them back if you want. I think in another video I was talking about this, but what I meant is keep the main volumes uh, boxed up, touching edge to edge. But all the secondary surfaces and even the third surfaces afterwards, if if it makes more sense to extend it back, feel free. There's no real, especially with the secondary surfaces, you could do whatever you want with it. So here I'm just using a bunch of blend curves down the middle. And what I did to align it to the other side is I actually quickly made a duplicate and mirrored the right side to the left side, because a lot of times it depends on the year, honestly. Alias always seem to change that around, but using a fake mirrored surface versus duplicating it and actually having something to touch. Usually I'll just do that while I'm building the surfaces in the middle, and as you see here, I'll do the same exact action on both sides, because later I'm gonna trim them down the middle. So you could also use other tools like there's a symmetric modeling tool, but right now I'm just sort of just getting it done as quickly as possible. So you'll see how and then it's really hard to tell because it's going so fast, but every time you see like those little boxes pop up and then quickly go away, most of the time it's just me deleting history. I delete history all day. It's definitely a different type of workflow, and there's some people that are their history is very sacred, and it's cool. It definitely has its own advantages, that type of workflow. But I got used to basically getting someone else's model and having to rebuild it, and a lot of refinement stuff. So so I just had to get used to not working with history. And also back in the day with Alias, history would make it freeze all the time. So I would just delete it. Nowadays it's a lot more stable, and if you could keep history and it doesn't mess with your workflow, keep history. I don't really care. And here I'm just adding see, it's all basically the same. There'll be some trickier sections later, that I think there's lessons to be learned, and I'll slow it down. But this work is all very technical. I'm just working my way from big fillet to small fillet. Always here you see how I'm trimming the middle. And it depends on what you want to do, but to me it doesn't really matter if you use a trim surface or you get an edge down the middle, or a lot of times there's a big volume across both sides. As long as where they meeting is fine, then you don't really need to be too careful on how you do it. Here I'm just using the blend curves to get those transitions and refine them. And then up here I could have I could have made it so my transitional surface goes along, you know, that those angles, but I didn't want that. I wanted my main surface to be a bit cleaner and independent of that. Um, so that when I do cut it with the headlight in my next step, it'll be easier for me. So there's a lot of stuff that I do that you know, might help me later down for a completely other move. You know, so it's always as you start to develop these sort of skill sets, you'll realize that you'll start modeling. You'll see the full picture, and then you can sort of um, you know, start helping out your future self earlier. I don't know if that makes sense, but right there, you see, it wasn't a trimmed on surface, so I quickly trim converted it, and then aligned it, and then there was still some error there with the spacing, so I projected lined it, and then and that way I got a nice clean line there. And then here I'm sort of like looking through all of it and just a little bit of CV massaging, and there everyone gets curvature. This is really when it starts to start looking good. I think, you know, once you add the secondary surfaces, everything looks a lot cleaner. Remember to save often. I don't think I save enough on in these, honestly. Like, and here I'm just double checking all the curvature. And I have had moments where I've lost hours and hours of my work because I forgot to save. It doesn't happen so often now. It's very compulsive now. I know when to save, or before I do anything too crazy, I'll save it. But you know, that's sort of the how Alias works. You know, in the design studio, every like, I don't know, at least three 4 times a day, you'll hear someone like all of a sudden scream "fuck," just because you know, it tends to freeze a lot. So luckily for this one, it wasn't that bad. And there's certain actions that you can avoid to make sure you don't freeze. And one of the ones I do a lot is delete history. So as you can see here, I projected those curves, and then I used that big surface to run that light across it. And this is just another way of putting structure even in the secondary part of the surface, you know, like not cheating, first making it hit the reticle, and then that way you have the cleanest line possible. A lot of times there's going to be natural S-ing, and that's just the natural part of the mathematics of that geometry. You know, uh, putting curves in a volume is always going to have a bit of an S. Well, most of the time it's going to have a bit of an S. You know, no need in sort of trying to plannerize every single design line, unless that's your look, you know. But I'll tell you right now that I've seen all the, you know, production models, and I've modeled myself concept cars, and you know, there's S-ing and fucked up transitions and all that. You know, they don't. It's really not that big a deal anymore, honestly. Before it used to be a lot more strict with your modeling and your surfacing, but nowadays the computers can handle so much. You know, it doesn't really. And also even the look of design is changing, and breaking tangencies and sharp lines, or S-ing surfaces or flat. So, you know, it really depends on the vision of the director, basically, or the board members. See here, I quickly did a I extended that surface out, non-merge, and then that just gave me that little corner. Obviously there'll be some issues with that corner later, but I know that I'm gonna, not issues, but I know that right now that's not positional, but I don't need it to be, because I know that I'm gonna run some fillets way later on in the process. Now I'm just getting I'm just surfacing a quick a quick surface for this hood. So this is yeah. So the face is basically a lot of the main volumes and design lines are down. So I'll move to the next part of the car, just because you know, it's we still got a lot of work to do, and you can't. I try not to stay in just one section. And now I'm gonna add the transitional surfaces for these surfaces, and as you see, uh, I untrim them, and then later I'll put back the design little copper insert that I have there. And I even for the back of the car, like those blackouts and all that, um, I build those. I build it up. I make sure to sort of be conscious of those since the beginning of the build because a lot of times that would be your biggest time sink in terms of like if you're not really aware of the back end stuff, then you could be like, all of a sudden you'll find yourself trying to figure out how you're going to close something off, or it's just not really solid, and you could kind of be spinning your wheels for a while. So remember to try to box in the whole volume of the car. I do that too with when in my interiors when I'm doing my doors or the opening and all that. I always or where it connects to the C pillar or the A pillar, and I always sort of have that in the back of my head because that's something that's gonna have to be solved eventually, and it's better to start thinking of that since from the beginning, especially once you want to actually mill it out. You sort of need everything closed up. You can't really have just surfaces up in the air. Here I'm just closing out the bottom of that, being very loose with it because I'm not sure if I really want to keep that or not. A lot of these things have already changed after this. Remember you're seeing an afternoon of work basically, and to me it's sort of worth it to uh, take the time and get this. It's sort of like when in the clay studio when they start to die knock it. I'll kind of go ahead and do all the transitional surfaces as fast as possible without too much concern over the quality of it, just because I want to see how it looks with these transitional surfaces, and then a lot of times once you have it all figured out, you'll see an error at this point in the process, and you'll be like, oh, okay, I got to change that, or this doesn't make sense, and it's hard to find that unless you really start to once you actually start until you start actually building these things. Just lining that up. And then here now I start adding the little fillets right there, just to kind of, this to me is even further down the line, like these little mini fillets, but sometimes they also help you figure out what if it's the right direction. And see, I quickly added inserted line there, trimmed it, and then now I added the fillet, and that was just to help me guide that surface in there. Hmm. 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 This to me is still very much uh, I don't know, like the close to the final stage, but it's not the final stage. Once I have all my transitions done, and I like the look of everything, and that's when I'll kind of go through the whole car and really refine everything. And in terms of surface structure and all that, it's relatively the same. It's just a little bit of just very fine refinement here and there. Sometimes there'll still be big volume changes at that point. If maybe I missed something, or maybe there's a certain S that it's a little too obvious, or sometimes it's difficult to know what the next move is until you go through this, like, a transitional part of it. And and but it's still very much early, and it's still like, this isn't final, but if you see the timing, and you've kind of seen everything I've done so far. It's not, I haven't really like pressed fast forward or anything like that, and we're already kind of done with the front, or at least the look of it, and the main transitions on the side, and that's just, one day of work. So so remember, I mean, I don't want to say it's one day of work, because then I don't want people to think that I don't know, if you don't think that this is very common. And I know I've said this before, but uh, this is completely a fun design model for me. Um, the real models, there's so much engineering criteria, design that's a lot less focused on the structure of it and more on design lines. And those surface transitions are a bit trickier, and there needs to be more massaging. So the design, the car design workflow is a fairly slow one. It just takes a long time to really put in and refine all those surfaces. And anybody inside a car studio will tell you that. I think the first like 3 weeks to a month, the models, it's okay, but it's not really. It's just a high end model, and then by the end of the second month, that's when I really consider it a really nice, a finished model. Everything has been double checked, and every angle and view looks really good. The design, the surfacing is extremely, like, as clean as I can make it, and then that's when we take it to the next step, which would be either VR analysis, or milling it out in foam, or milling out in clay, and then the clay sculptors get my surface, and then the designers do all the changes they want, and then I'll get scanned, and then I get it back, and then I make those changes digitally. Um, but yeah, that tends to be the back and forth in digital design, and then depending on the studio, if you're a satellite studio, or if you maybe your small operation that already goes into production modeling, like a lot of these startups, then you go to the next step. But most of the time in most of the studios, it's your job, and the job of that studio too, is to really push it, and the what and try to um no, not, you don't have to make everything completely, real. It's sort of like the job of the design studio to push the engineering aspects of it a little more. And also it's incredible, especially lately, what engineers have accomplished. And that's, I think seeing what's on the road right now, it's a bigger reflection on the advancement of the science of building a car versus our design intention, because crazy design intentions have been going on forever, but we're limited to what can and can't be built. So nowadays, with all the cars that are coming out, it's really amazing how much engineers are fulfilling the vision of these designers, and truly, I don't want to say unsung heroes, because I think they're always very well respected, but it's not only design, it's a reflection of the industry moving forward. So yeah, now you get a little bit, and then a lot of times these cars are more, they're doing it more, where they're getting influenced by the structure of the design in the beginning, versus us just grabbing an engineering document, and sort of trying to figure out what the best package fits in there. But that's just, I don't even know why I'm even talking about that. That's just kind of a little view inside the design modeling process. It's been changing dramatically, since I started working. nowadays there's we do a lot of VR. That's one of the things my company sells basically is I set up VR environments for people, and then they analyze this in VR, and then it gets milled out in a foam, and then that's where you sort of evaluate the model, and then it might get milled out in clay if that's part of the studio, but a lot of times that type of cost are very difficult. This I'm just sort of reproportioning them by trimming them and untrimming them. Typical design modeling. There's not too much. There's only so many puzzles to solve in surfacing, and then after a while, um, it's very easy to find solutions for all the problems you have. You only there's only so many things to solve, and there's only so many ways to solve it. So and that's another reason why my speed in general is just very quick, because I've modeled for so long and I've modeled so many cars. I try to tell this to my students. Um, a lot of the reason why this looks good is because it's just because the sheer number of hours practiced and different exteriors that I've made. So and it was a very natural progression in terms of being able to execute a good design and model it well. Um, and in the beginning of my career, I was exactly like any, it just takes a really long time to really understand the technical aspects of it. But once you do, and once you stay with certain laws, the surfacing becomes really easy and very quick. Here I'm moving to the body side, and this is a bit of a tricky one. So the first thing I do is add a fillet between that two surface, and then I leave it in default, and I extend it out and cut it, and then I add this curve, put a little bit of volume in there, of the negative volume, and then surface that. And if it comes out clean already, then I'll just kind of leave it like that. And then here, to get the transition between both to get the transition in this middle, I used a tubular offset to get something close. Then I duplicated that curve, and then I aligned it to that surface. And now I'm trying to figure out how to throw it to all the way to the other side of this surface. Here I'm using the tubular offset tool too. And I think even later I change it to use just a projection. And then now I'm using the freeform blend, and then one side I'm keeping it positional. And then so now if you notice, first I try to leave the transitional surface till the end, as opposed to building that and then building the other end. I first did the other side, and then now I'm trying to mix them. In general, since the volumes are all talking to each other using my guide surfaces, and they're all reaching one place, it tends to come out pretty clean naturally. A lot of times that's what it is. It's just geometry. I feel like that's a big part of my job to help the designer understand what is possible and what isn't possible, because as a modeler you just have a higher understanding of surfaces and geometry. So a lot of times, well, that's a big generalization. I mean, obviously, depending on who you're talking to. Um, but in my experience, a lot of times, especially with younger designers, they're fighting the geometry, and you do all this CV massaging to try to get it to work. But in the end, if the geometry is still the same, then you're always gonna have those errors. So it's all about understanding that and figuring out where you want to hide them, or just basically living with the fact that this is a sort of uh, the result of that, you know. A lot of times the number one thing to you know, and sometimes, because sometimes you'll come across some sketches that you've been sort of like scratching your head over, and a lot of times it's because, you know, it's easy to put on, you know, you could sketch anything and it doesn't have to really be based on reality. So a lot of times I'll just, besides since I already know what is possible and what isn't possible, it's easy for me. But in the beginning of when I was still learning this, I would basically look for examples on in a real car, and a lot of time, you know, if every single thing, nothing's new. It's geometry. I mean, they might have approached it with a different, but with a different design element or a different design look, but in the end, you know, it's if you can find it out in the real world, that means that it is possible, and then you could sort of try to accomplish that. But a lot of times, if you don't see it anywhere, it's not because it's a brand new idea that no one's tried. It's because the geometry is just not is not set up to, you just can't accomplish a certain design look, you know. And here I'm doing the same thing I did on the body side, on the corner we just did. It's just the fillet tool to sort of just give me that transition, and or give me those volumes in there, and then I can start sort of slowly building that corner. And you'll see here that there's a lot of back and forth of alignment, curves, squares, and even when I look back at this, you know, you sort of see how I accomplished it and what I'm doing now, and it's almost like you can see that there was quicker ways of doing this, but like I said before, you know, it's don't go crazy over is this correct or this isn't correct, you know. Just kind of keep moving forward, and then eventually, especially you'll see here that I do a lot of different ways of trying to get that transition and control all those points without having to CV massage all of them. And I even do a lot of CV massaging regardless, but especially once you're talking about a surface like this, it's sort of like, in my head, if there's that much change, it's better to try to make you maybe use a square tool like this and just clean it up again, and then move those corners like that. See, it's all about trying to get, if your CVs look good, um, uh, and then your volumes are all matched up, then everything else will just you know, work. That's one of the things that I learned very early on my career, that you can cheat your way through anything, but in the end, you're still gonna, you know, you're it's gonna eventually come and bite you in the butt. I've always found. So that's why I'm very structured with how I do my surfacing, because I always know that when I don't use this sort of method, I start seeing these wobbles, and it just doesn't feel right to me. And honestly, that's just kind of how I approach modeling. I have a you know, many of my friends in the industry, that's just how that's how they model. There always has to, it always needs to start by a theoretical, and then you add the volumes, you know, not just like crazy lines in space, you know, that don't really talk to each other. But you know, obviously, again, that's just a certain style, and it depends on who you're working with. See, and here's another place where I was like, I don't think it was that worth it to get that curvature there, right now at this moment. You know, it looks fine when I analyze the highlights. And then here you see I'm cutting up, I'm trimming and untrimming the this surface to try to kind of get a good like middle point of a transition. And then once I find that, I trim it. And there I did a quick freeform blend like I did last time, with one side curvature and the other side positional. And now I'm trying to find, and I extend that surface, and then I trim a projectile line, and then I trim again to sort of clean that up, and then I line it to that curve that we made, and then I project a line that surface there. And this type of treatment, it only works in certain situations where there isn't the movement isn't as extreme as opposed to like this one. um, but you can't just use this sort of surfacing structure to um, every time you hit something like this, because it's working based on a lot of the angles, and a lot of times the angles are just not there, so you either have to make the blend bigger, or you have to move the main volume so that they kind of talk to each other more. But just remember that I set up my model to work a lot in these types of transitions, but a lot of times in many cases it won't work, and you would need to find a different solution. Remember to save. Mm. I think this might have been. Oh, there you go. This is the next day. Now I want to do it. I want to do the this transition, and that's how I always do these sort of like triangle volumes where where a bunch of surfaces meet up. Like first I'll add a fillet on default, and I'm only using it as a way to guide me. You see, like right now I'm gonna project it and trim those surfaces, and then the original fillet I used to make that isn't even part of it. And then I did another freeform blend with one side curvature and the other side positional, like we've been doing. And actually, just because all the volumes are talking to each other, you see, yeah, you get this really clean line. And I've in terms of getting these sort of structures, this is definitely one of the more better executions that I've had in my life. Just because the geometry played very nicely with that design. Now I'm just adding a quick fillet, just to kind of see how it would look like. And see, a lot of times people, when people see that, they that type of corner, they get a bit uh, intimidated, as in like they're like, whoa, how am I gonna do that? You know, there's a sharp corner and then it's fading. But if you see how I approached it, you know, once you really break it down to just volumes and everyone's talking to each other, it's really not that it's not that difficult. I haven't really done anything too crazy, I think, in except for maybe the CV massaging, which is very advanced. But before that, it doesn't really, you know, it's pretty simple. Here I'm it's closing up the back end of those surfaces, and you know, even though that's like that would just be an edge, and I wouldn't need to do that technically. You know, I like is like I said before, I always try to close up the whole thing, because it's kind of like a puzzle too. You know, it's like a 3D puzzle, and I and the better I can get it to be closed and real, the easier my job is. Now we're getting a little closer to the end, and I wanted to at least show you guys how, because if you remember, I had that reflector light, or like a side light over there, and then now I have this giant fillet sort of eating up all that stuff. So this is how I basically solved that. And you know, it gets a bit difficult when you approach these sort of problems, to figure out what is how to solve it, and my technique is always just slowly move forward, you know, like I'll kind of be like, okay, well, I know I need a big surface here, and I know that's gonna eat up all this stuff, but let's just put that big surface here, and let's do a transition. And then here I run it down the side, with the wheel well. And after this, the only thing left is a quick how I did that roof shape, and we're basically done now. And you know, this my videos are more just to sort of like showcase the process, not really a step by step, because regardless, even if I showed you every single second and all that, you know, Yeah, it really the way you learn is through fucking up a lot. Like like the more the that's how I am avoiding all the pitfalls because I've ran through all those pitfalls millions of times. So just remember to try to keep the base correct, and then from there you're gonna go down paths that make no sense, and you'll learn, and it's not really an error. Also, even inside the design studio, you don't no one no one cares if you went down the wrong method. For if you lose an afternoon of work, nobody in a design studio would say you lost an afternoon of work, because you didn't. You learned, and you became more valuable to that company, and also that's just part of the process. No one gets the model perfectly the first time. That's just not really how it goes. So remember that. And if you actually take the time to watch all my videos and see all my articles and do that, my company does, I do apprenticeships, but it really depends on the person, but I do have those sort of sources. So if you're interested in that, you pay with blood. No, I'm joking. You pay with skills. Uh, and I'm very particular on who I could train one by one, and also you sort of have to be here in California. So that's another big thing. But anyways, you could always send me emails asking me questions and stuff. Complex questions, not simple shit. Um, Anywho, so here I'm still very confused, and I'm trying to figure out how to connect it. So I just um, rebuilt it and trim converted it, and then aligned it just one corner to it. And what's basically happening is I'm just rebuilding the same thing I did before, but with this new rounder surface as one of the main surfaces. So just remember, always do that when you come across a fairly difficult area like this. Just try to break it down to volumes, and get everything up to the edge, and stuff like that. Yeah, after this, I don't know how many more Alias videos I'll do. I might do some where I start off from the very very beginning, like my curve networks and all that. But I also do grasshopper stuff and moto stuff. So to me, Alias, there's a certain amount of lessons to learn, but honestly, it's one of those things that you can't read about it, or you can um, just because you watch this YouTube video, it's not gonna make you a good modeler. Just 'cause it's like painting and anything in life, even math. If you might understand a concept, but not until you solve a couple problems yourself, or paint a million pictures, will you actually become a good painter. Just try to take just see how my approach, what type of result you get, or I'm getting, and if that's something that really that you like, then sort of take the approaches I take. But in the and when you're inside if when you're inside when I was inside the design studio, everywhere I went, I would learn different from different people. um One of the people is what I call like the French method, the people from Vintech, Frederick and Florian. A lot of these guys are in Lucid right now. They're great. They have a completely different modeling method to mine. It's curved networks, and everything's live, and it's really cool. It's really quick too, uh, and so remember, if whatever I'm doing doesn't really you kind of like your own technique, is that go with that, perfect that. And anyways, regardless if you use curves or if you use polygon modeling or clay modeling, the basic laws are the same. I give the same speeches when I'm talking about polygon modeling. First think about the big volumes, You know, don't think about the details until way later, you know, and then do a lot of refinement. And then that's how it's the same with clay. Here where I'm just doing some trimming and everything, sort of finishing off. The last thing is going to be the top, and then I guess the top is a super quick way on how I put round surfaces on big slabs. And see here now, I kind of like where it went. I'm trying to figure out what to do next. Oh, I'm lining up I thought I already went with the roof. Yeah, here I just line up those main slabs to this new transitional slab that I made. And that's why back in the day, you know, I did the proper structure, because now I have that structure to align this other structure to. And if I didn't, I wouldn't have a place to align that, you know. And so that's if I wouldn't have done that way, you know, 2-3 hours ago, I would be it would be difficult for me to figure out how to block in this section. And then you see in that corner, I'll lift that corner up to make myself a better transition, because that corner is a bit free, as in, like, there's really nothing there except the headlight. So a lot of times my main volumes, when I'm doing the transitional surfaces, I'll be CV massaging it so that they're talking to each other, and this really gives it a nice look. That's one of the main reasons why everything looks so smooth too, is my CV massaging. You know, I make sure all my CVs look good, and the transitions are all and the volumes are talking to each other. I use those transitional surfaces to really make sure that they're in the same world, you know. And if you keep kind of going down that path, you start getting these really nice surfaces and transitions. And I guess I'll even after this video, I know I did it last time, I'll do some more. I'll record a quick video on where it's at right now. And then I think probably the next time you see it will be when it's done. And that's going to be in a very long time, because I still have to do a lot. I'm doing a lot of algorithms, and then I'm doing a new environment. So do not hold your breath. But I will try to hold my breath as well while I do this, because it's so quick. Hold on. Okay, didn't work. Okay, I thought it was a bit quicker than that, but yeah. So I added the curves, trim them, even keep it live at this point. And then then I'll add the blend points. And if you notice, I'm adding the blend points on the bigger surfaces first, and then the in-between surfaces, I'll just use another method that takes into consideration the position of those lines too. So as opposed to just freeform blending all of them, and then they wouldn't have positional alignment between themselves, I'm doing, instead of that, I just do every other one I do with a square. Oh, and then I found out that there was some sort of positional error there, so I untrim it and trim again. Okay, I'm glad I didn't hold my breath, because I would have died already. So I guess it wasn't that quick. Anyways, yeah, this is basically the end of this video. I'll post up I'll turn on the finish, not the finish, but where it's at right now, and then you guys can see some nice transitional videos, or not videos, transitional highlight shots. There you go. Okay. Okay, so this is where Electra is at, and she looks good. I'm using this shader I made, and it's really nice. I'll probably add it I'll add it in my website as soon as I have time. But yeah, soon you'll find this. It's just a little ramp. It's really nice. But I really like looking at the transitions like this. Mm-hmm. Oh, let me show you guys with the actual wireframe. So for this one, I added this transitional surface here, and then I connected these surfaces that I broke it from here to here, and I connected it to here and made sure that they're aligned, and then so this gave me a really nice clean little character line right here. And then here too, see it vanishes really nice and cleanly. See, all the surfaces are still fairly simple. And then let me see. I added this cool little like wristband right there, but it's just a trim and offset. Here it came out looking really nice, and this is also why I'm this is why the car industry, all this NURB modeling was basically developed for the car industry, and it's because we need this type of control. I see a lot of people using either fusion or polygon modeling for this, but the thing is, if you really want to control every aspect of your surface down to the millimeter and or the hundredths of a millimeter, and that's sort of the control you need in the automotive industry, you need to know how to do NURB modeling on everything else. And also, if you really see these reflections, that's how I see a lot of videos with people making cars that they would never be inside a car design studio. It's to me, it seems it's very funny because it's people that have never been inside a car design studio teaching people how to do models, and they have no idea of proportions or highlight control. So when you're deciding what path to take or what software is the best, think if you can make transitions like this, controlled highlights like this, in polygon modeling, the more details you add, the worse it gets for the overall. Like you always have to add either a line or an edge to add more detail, and then that line fucks with the rest of your model, and that's just not really a possibility in the automotive design. So but there is actually a place for polygon modeling in automotive design. In the beginning, certain studios, BMW Design Works, while I was there, they had some polygon modelers. Hyundai taught a lot of their designers how to use Modo, and I think right now they're using Maya. And a lot of times for designers. Any method is fine. I'm still gonna have to rebuild it anyways, honestly. So whatever feels more natural. But but I was always very obsessed with surface control and quality control and line control, and Alias and isom surface is another one that is used in the automotive industry. Have that type of control. Rhino still doesn't have that type of control. I think the Rhino 6 is coming out, and I'll check out. I have Rhino myself, and I usually always keep my eye open on all the NURB modelers because I'm always very fluid with the software I use. But Alias has always been a staple in every automotive design studio. I've worked in 6 different studios, and the majority of them use Alias high-end product design firms like Apple, they use Alias. You know, this software, there's a big learning curve, but once you have the full control over your surfaces, then this is basically your best solution. And I don't know, maybe Fusion or T-Spline or Rhino, they might you know reach those levels, but I'm always keeping an eye on them, and I'm always seeing you know what are what they can and can't do, and since I'm already so advanced in Alias that it just seems like most of these softwares are very simple, and you can't really do any of the really high end stuff. And with the timing that what I see they do, and in the time that they do it, like inside a design studio, you could come up with a pretty dope design using Alias. There's no real need for I don't know, polygon modeling, or unless it's good for your process, your own process. But in the end, inside a design studio, the majority of them will be Alias, and there's just always a lot of opportunity inside Alias. You know, that's why my company, I just went off on my own, and just because there's such a big demand right now, and there's very little skilled workers. So if you are a skilled worker, you know, hit me up. Now it really depends on your skill set, and you know, I try to limit it to people that I see a lot of potential in. But anyways, I just wanted to you know, end this video saying that, you know, thanks for watching. Good luck on your design or modeling career. You know, I don't know when I'll release more videos with Alias, maybe next year. But I think for right now I'll focus on finishing up this model, and later I'm gonna do the interior. I haven't decided if I should record it or not, because it's really it slows up my flow, and I don't like it. But I think regardless though, these videos might help some of you out there to see exactly how somebody who's in the industry, you know, I've been working 7 years as a Class A modeler. Now I have my own company, and I do a lot of consulting work. I do a lot of work inside studios, a lot of international work, you know, through digital. You know, that's a really good thing about Alias or digital modeling in general, is that I'm open to the international workforce. But yeah, that's a whole other conversation. And this is just my transitional video where I hope that it really helps you guys see how it is done. And the difference between this model and a Class A model is very small. It's very minuscule. I mean, the main difference is that obviously the Class A model would have to have you know, would be engineered, as in like there would be a lot more things to consider. But in terms of the surface quality, you know, whether it's buildable or not is very different. But in terms of the surface quality, edge to edge, you know, the transitions, this is basically Class A. You know, just a little more refinement and making sure that everything's nice and talking to itself. But yeah, so it's not rocket science. It just takes a really long time to understand. But once you do, you know, there's a lot of opportunities, a lot of things you could do. But anyways, yeah. So I hope you guys have a nice week. I am going on a vacation, so I won't answer any emails. And yeah, I'll talk to you guys later. Bye bye.